Welcome back to Fed Gov Today's special coverage of GEOINT 2023. Mapping is one of the basic components of geospatial intelligence. Geographers in the federal government say it's still important to produce paper maps. Lee Schwartz is Geographer of the United States and Director of the Office of the Geographer at the State Department. At GEOINT 2023, I asked him about his office's mission.
Well, I'm at the Department of State, and I'm the director of the Office of the Geographer and Global Issues. And that office, in some shape or form, has been around for 100 years now. We recently celebrated our 100th anniversary. And my official responsibilities, or the responsibilities that are tied to that position, have to do with providing official U.S. government policy on international boundaries, so that all government agencies need to follow the guidance, the boundary guidance, and the cartographic guidance that our office issues on maps that they produce. So that's what the job officially is assigned with doing. But functionally, we are part of the Intelligence Research Bureau, so we do intelligence analysis on transboundary issues, sort of soft power issues, if you will, human trafficking, food security, infectious diseases, human rights, a lot of those issues that aren't specific to a particular region. And we joined the Intelligence Research Bureau after World War II, and in support of our policy bureaus, when there was a topic that didn't fit neatly into a region, like Asia or South America, they kind of threw it into the geographer's office. And so now we do all these transboundary functional issues in addition to the traditional cartography and boundary issues that we follow.
You've been a pretty active participant in this event in particular. You had a keynote here. What was the message you wanted to convey to the audience there?
Well, the message I conveyed to this audience was related to the theme of the GEOINT Symposium, which is Maps to Metaverse. And I think I'm sort of old school. I'm a traditional geographer. I got all my college degrees in geography, taught geography at the university level, and the message I was trying to convey is don't forget the underpinnings of the discipline of geography. That as we go into artificial intelligence and machine learning and a lot of remote sensing powerful techniques and tools, there's a lot of methodologies that classically trained geography brings us in terms of ground truth, in terms of understanding people and culture and sort of transactional nature at the personal level. And so if you combine that type of in situ knowledge with all of the remote technologies that are advancing so quickly, I think that's a good combination, and they're complementary skills that we can't forget about.
How has that technology acceleration influenced the way that geographers like you do their jobs, and how has the proliferation of the kind of information that geographers use, now that it's available so widely in the commercial sector, has that changed the way that people like you do your jobs?
It hasn't changed that much the way we do our jobs, because we're a small office and we rely on some of the more powerful organizations that have those capabilities. And so we are the recipients of a lot of the information at a much faster pace than we ever used to be able to get it. We work a lot on humanitarian issues, and it's actually hard to operate in that space now because of the instant information we're getting, drones flying over earthquake sites. And so we have to figure out what space we can occupy in order to provide our policymakers the type of information that they still need from this huge amount of data. We have policymakers that don't have time to play around with interactive mapping tools or read a 15-page article on something. So we have to figure out, particularly in the maps we do, how I can give a real quick picture instantly that'll convey the message we need to convey. So I've done some lectures on lying with maps, and I wouldn't say that you lie with maps, but you can take data and give a different message depending on the content and how it's used. Our cartographers are pretty talented at doing that.
Yeah, it's the old, people said that about economists for a long time. A good economist can make the data say whatever the economist wants it to say. Right. Same thing, it sounds like, in the geography.
Sure, we can make something pop out of the map easily. Yeah. That's the message we want to give.
Yeah. So the underlying theme, it sounds like, of what you're saying is speed is the big change agent. And I guess the good news is people can make decisions instantaneously almost. I guess the bad news is sometimes they have to make decisions instantaneously with maybe limited information.
Well, I think the benefit of that also is the QA/QC is much faster. So we can be more confident of a lot of the information because we have such powerful computing tools to check the veracity of what we need to know. But at the same time, I made a point in my talk yesterday that we can't be afraid of having gaps in our maps or gaps in our data, because sometimes not having information is the type of information you have to have. And a lot of times people, in an effort to fill a map, will fill it with information that may be out of date or that they know is not the most accurate. So we have to be a little bit, I think, circumspect in presenting everything instantaneously all the time.
How does one discern whether it sounds like you just said no information sometimes is better than old or bad information. How does one discern when when's the right time to make that kind of a decision?
Well, I'm not sure I can answer that question, but I will say that I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding of what intelligence is. And a lot of times they believe that good intelligence is based on a lot of information that nobody else has access to. When in reality, I think a good intelligence analyst makes judgments based on the information that we don't know and fills in the gaps with judgments. We may be right, we may be wrong. I had a boss once that said he'd rather have us be wrong and get noticed than never be noticed.
Yeah.
And so to have the freedom to make those types of judgments based on the best available information, based on solid tools and methodology, I think is important, and we may not always be right.
Another underlying theme that it sounds like is that technology is accelerating what you can do, but the techniques that you use to do what you and your colleagues do hasn't changed very much. Is that accurate?
I would say in my office, we still rely mostly on traditional cartographic products. And we have outstanding cartographers in the office, I think the best in the business. And having an elegant map, I still think is important. With all the tools and technologies we have, last year at the GEOINT Symposium we had a session called "What is a Map?" And I made the point there that in many ways a map it's art as well as information.
Why is that important?
Why is what
that a map it can also be a work of art, or that it maybe should be?
I think in order to get noticed.
Yeah.
We're playing in a very crowded field. And if you want something to stand out and get noticed, I think the artistic quality of a map is still important.
Interesting. Where do you see this going as a lot of the discussion here has been around the digital transformation that some of these organizations are undergoing, and you mentioned the theme is from maps to metaverse. What's the trajectory look like moving forward in your view?
Well, I think as we can see here in the exhibition floor of the GEOINT Symposium, I think the locus or the focus of technology innovation is no longer with the U.S. government. It used to be, and now I think it's in the private sector. And I think the trick and the challenge now is to how to leverage all of that innovation and figure out how best to target the resources that the government does have, and let the private sector, take the lead in this.
Does that make your job easier or harder, do you think, that so much capability and so much information now lies in the hands of private sector organizations?
I think it makes my job harder, to tell you the truth, because there's so much information. I mean, everybody's struggling with big data and how to figure out which data are the most important. So I think it makes my job a bit more difficult to separate the chaff from the wheat.
Yeah, and that was going to be my last question, which is that the biggest challenge that you have is when this information comes in from the commercial sector, understanding to what degree you can trust it and have confidence in using it?
No, I think the biggest challenge I have is to figure out what information to provide for our policymakers at the Department of State, because at the end of the day, that's my job. I respond to the needs and the requirements of our senior policymakers, the Secretary of State on down, and sometimes they need the information they need is information that may be readily available, but we have to package it in a way for a particular meeting or a particular negotiation. So to figure out what the timeliness and when to get that message to our policymakers, I think, is the challenge in the world of big data.
Lee Schwartz, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining me today.